Good afternoon, everyone. Today, our group is going to talk about sea level rise and its impact on marine ecosystems. Sea level rise refers to an upsurge in particular level of the oceans resulting from the impact of global warming. As you can see from the graph, the global mean sea level has risen by an estimate of up to 8 to 9 inches since 1800. Within the next 2,000 years, there will be a 2.3 meters rise in sea levels per 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature. The countries listed below are some of the areas that have experienced adverse climatic conditions due to sea level rise. In Indonesia, the sea level is rising at a rate of up to 25 centimeters per year in the northern part of Jakarta, which is the current capital city of Indonesia. Whereas in the United States, the sea level is expected to rise up to 4.3 feet by 2100. The major cause of sea level rise is global warming, and the factors that influence global warming are the expansions of seawaters and the melting of ice glaciers. The increase in reliance on fossil fuel power machinery increases greenhouse gas emissions and results in higher atmospheric temperature. The consistency of high atmospheric temperature increases average summer melting and diminished snowfall, resulting in the continuous melting of glaciers. This ice albedo feedback is an example of a strong positive feedback which amplifies its original actions. So as the atmosphere gets warmer, more glaciers melt. And then the darker ocean absorbs more heat, causing more glaciers to melt. And this makes the Earth warmer overall.
Because sea level rise is a primarily global issue, there are many ecosystems affected by it. Notable ecosystems include mangroves, freshwater-dependent ecosystems, coastal wetlands and marshes, and estuaries. While sea level rise can have many devastating effects on these ecosystems, some significant consequences include coastal retreat, habitat loss, more frequent storms, and sea ice loss. To begin, there's an estimated 1 to 1.5 meter coastal retreat for every centimeter of sea level rise. In addition, sea level rise will change the areas where estuaries can grow and will also inflict higher rates of erosion for salt marshes. Wetlands will be overtaken by the sea if they fail to migrate. Sea ice is a major source of protection for coasts from storms. Due to sea level rise, thaw-frost cycles are increasing in frequency, leading to more devastating weather patterns. As well, the graph depicted on the slide shows the general downwards trend of the duration and extent of sea ice cover. With enough time, these effects may possibly be irreversible. There are a variety of factors that cause certain ecosystems to be particularly vulnerable to the sea level rise. Delicate shores, such as those made out of glacial tills, are susceptible to the erratic changes in winter conditions. Proximity to saltwater is of concern as well. Freshwater-dependent ecosystems in general are at risk of dramatic change if salinity levels rise. Organisms that are particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels consist mainly of those that reside on the coast. However, those inland are affected as well. Notable impacted organisms include humans, terrestrial fauna and flora in coastal ecosystems, mature terrestrial trees, and sedentary organisms. Due to the increased probability of flooding during storms and increased risk of damage to house foundations, roads, and railways, humans can be severely impacted by sea level rise. Osmotic stress occurs when there's a drastic change in solute concentrations outside of the cell, leading to rapid water movement across the cell membrane. Therefore, if sufficient saltwater enters an ecosystem, many different plants could experience osmotic stress and could potentially die from it. Finally, sedentary organisms will not be able to appropriately shift to the rising sea level. These organisms must learn to adapt to the changes in oxygen, temperature, and salinity levels, otherwise they will not be able to survive.
As outlined by Megan, coastlines are essential parts of the world. They serve as nurseries and protective habitats for a significant amount of biodiversity. This is true for both animals and humans, as over 20% of the human population lives within 30 kilometers of the coast. One of the physical impacts was coastal erosion and retreat, as outlined before. This is an issue as most of the land around coastal areas are filled up with human infrastructure. So this gives no space for the retreating coastal systems to settle down in new areas, and therefore these ecosystems can be lost. An example of the dangers of coastal erosion for humans comes from Malaysia. 2,300 kilometers of their 4,800 kilometer coastline was set as vulnerable in 2000, This is half of an entire nation's coastal environment that is at risk from sea level rise. A method of forecasting the extent of sea level rise is the Representative Concentration Pathway, or RCP. This is a projection of how much greenhouse gas concentrations there will be in the atmosphere. These projections are made with a variety of factors. For example, in RCP 8.5, the highest projection here has greenhouse gas emissions continuing to rise without stopping. In RCP 2.6 projections, which is the lowest one here, the greenhouse gas concentrations peak at around 2050 and then continue to decline. This kind of RCP projection shows us how much the sea level could rise globally. It's expected that by 2200, the global sea level will rise at least 0.5 meters and 2.8 meters at the maximum if we go along with RCP 8.5 levels. Sea level rise increases severity of natural disasters, leading to loss of habitats and protection for coastal areas. It also increases salinization and osmotic stress, as outlined before, and large economic damage as megacities are located at coasts. These impacts must be stopped or mitigated with proper solutions.
In terms of solutions, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is important to slow sea level rise from happening on a global scale. However, even if that does happen, the damage has already been done, since even the lowest RCP still results in a significant rise in sea level. The main focus on solutions has to be more local. There are three main approaches to handling sea level rise. First, there's migration away from the ocean. This can apply to both humans and animals. Government programs to relocate people are needed for areas which will be completely overtaken by sea level rise. Example is the Isle of Jean Charles in Louisiana, which has a running government program to relocate everyone to a new island. Specifically for animals, we need to protect upland habitats so they can migrate to upland habitats when the sea level rises. Another possible solution for human survival is actually adapting to sea level rise and accepting water as an integrated part of cities, sometimes called aquitecture. This would be necessary in extreme cases and can be done since large floating residential areas already exist in several places around the world, like Amsterdam. The third main solution would be physical barriers. Physical barriers are a way to actually slow the erosion of coastlines and protect habitat, and they're already common around the world. In terms of physical barriers, we have a few different types. There are man-made structures like seawalls, which are either built into the shore or offshore to stop waves and prevent coastal erosion. The downsides to these are how expensive they are to build, and their construction can cause damage to habitats. A more sustainable type of barrier can be built simply through protection and restoration of coral reefs and mangrove forests, which protect from erosion by slowing heavy wave action. And finally, this last image is from a recent study of a gate that imitates past tides in a type of coastal wetland with one entrance for water. Regulating the tides actually caused the wetland to recover a lot of the vegetation it had already lost from sea level rise. Barriers are the simplest solution to sea level rise, but they only work effectively if we can keep the sea level rise to a minimum by limiting greenhouse gas emissions. Here's a summary of our issue. I probably won't read the whole thing, but thank you for listening.